6.
6. Okay. My hearing is not as good. All right. Wonderful. Thank you. I'll mute myself.
That's all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, it should be live streaming now, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the General Licensing Committee meeting. I'll just run through, I think, the role of the committee is to review any licence of the leisure industry where appropriate, or taxi and Hackney carriage licences, including driver's licences. There are 11 councillors on the committee who make the decisions. There's also a number of officers present representing reports and administration and a video conference, and also providing legal advice. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Please make sure, unless you're speaking, that your microphones are on mute. Have your video turned on. And when you wish to speak, press the blue hand button, please, and then you will be spoken to in order that you come up on the list. If you need to leave the meeting, please let us know so that we know actually that you haven't left the meeting altogether. So thank you. Elaine, if I could ask you please to go through the list of members that are present, please.
I'll do that, Chairman, if that's okay.
Joe, sorry, Joe.
Okay, don't worry.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Sorry.
I'll just do a roll call of names then. So if you can just confirm that you're present. Councillor David Andrews.
Present.
Councillor Stan Avison.
Present.
Councillor Billy Brooks.
Present.
Councillor Sandra Campbell-Wardman.
Present.
Councillor Graham Cullen. Councillor Cullen.
Present.
Councillor Sarah Devereux.
Present.
Councillor Manjon.
Present.
Councillor Neil Jones.
Present.
Councillor Andrew Leonard.
Present.
Councillor Claire Newman.
Present.
And Councillor Turton Levers is absent. That's it, thank you.
Thank you for that, Joe. Are there any disclosures of interest? Please show if you've got an interest. No. Item 3 is the open minutes. And that's to confirm the open minutes of the general licensing meeting held on the 2nd of March 2020. I propose those minutes are correct.
I'll second
Do I have
them,
a seconder?
Councillor. I'll second them, Councillor Avison.
Has anyone got anything that they wanted to raise in those minutes that might, any corrections or anything? Thank you. No, that's fine, thank you. Now, proposed to bring off the original amendment, it was supposed to be item 9. It will now be item 4, Hackney Carriage and Private Household Vehicle Policy Open. It was item 9 was. Could I ask Adrian, Mr. Twiddy, please, to run through that report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I'll go through the report for members, and of course I'm here to answer questions if anybody's got any questions for me at the end of this submission. So this report revolves around a review of your Hackney Carriage and private hire vehicle licensing policy. The authority is committed to reviewing all of its licensing policies on a rolling programme, and this is one of the ones that's now come up for review. The committee looked at the policy in January of this year, January 2020, and you made a proposal for a revised policy, But of course, before that, you issued it for consultation to the taxi trade and interested parties, and you asked officers to come back to you with that report on the consultation results at a later date. So that's what's before you today. So there are 3 recommendations in the report. I'll go through those just before I go through the actual body of the report itself, Chair. So, like I've said, you're here to consider the consultation results, listen to what people have had to say, and decide whether you wish to take those consultation responses on board in relation to your proposed policy document. The second recommendation is for you to adopt the revised policy today, subject to any amendments that you may wish to make based on the consultation results. And the proposal or the recommendation to you, if you're minded to go with that, is for the policy to be adopted with immediate effect. So it would come into effect immediately. We have made one slight change to that, though, in the recommendation. One part of the policy relates to the introduction of a Hackney Carriage knowledge test. Now, that would be not an in-depth, really complex test. It would be a general test to ensure that applicants for Hackney Carriage driver licenses knew the area in which they were going to work, understood where East Lindsey boundaries end and finish, just so they can prove they've got a good general knowledge of the East Lindsey area and the area in which they're going to work. Given that everything that's going on at the moment with some of the lockdown arrangements and COVID-19, we did wonder whether the knowledge test was just probably one step too far in the process at the moment, with all the other challenges that we in the trade have at the moment. So if you're minded to adopt that part of the policy, the actual recommendation from officers is to perhaps consider that to come into the force in the new year. I'm sorry, there's a phone ringing in my office. I never expected that. I'm just going to switch it off.
That's all right. It's okay, Adrian.
I'm sorry about that, Chair.
That's okay.
So, obviously, at the same time as this policy document, there has been some real challenges for the licensing regime and the taxi and private hire trade in relation to COVID-19. And there was some changes that just need to be made in the current policy to enable the licensing regime to just continue during this difficult period. And I'll come to those suggestions or recommendations in a moment for you. In relation to the policy document, Chair, consultation was issued and we received 2 detailed consultation responses from members of the Hackney Carriage and private hire trade. And those responses are set out on page 41 of the report pack that you have in front of you. I don't intend going through those one by one, because what we've done for you in the report, we've given you the responses from the members of the trade, and then we've given you the officer comments in relation to those. So if members want to ask me questions on those, Chair, I'm quite happy to answer those. There was one thing I did want to mention in detail, and that is on page 43 of the report pack. This authority currently, and the proposal in the policy document is for this to continue. This authority requires taxi and private hire drivers to achieve the medical standard that is the DVLA Group 2 medical standard. That's the same standards as a lorry or bus driver would have to achieve. This authority requires drivers under 65 years of age to go through that medical and achieve that standard every 6 years. And that's to tie in with the fact that you're issuing driver licenses for every 3 years. So having your medical done every 6 years ties in well with that renewal process, that 3-yearly renewal process, let's say. Now, the DVLA procedure for lorry and bus drivers is that drivers go through it every 5 years, but of course the currency of those licenses are different to the 3-year licenses that this authority issue. The correspondence that you have there from an interested party is that they feel that this authority should be obliged to accept the 5-year process for medicals rather than going every 6 years. As officers, we disagree with that. We think you're able to adopt the medical standard and look at how the regularity of the medicals yourself. We don't feel that there's an obligation on your part to, if you're adopting the DVLA medical standard, to go for 5 years rather than this authority's 6 years. I think it would be fair to say that the consultee disagrees with that, and that's ultimately a decision for yourselves to make on that one. In relation to the policy document itself, Chair, I think it would be fair to say, based on the consultation results, officers are not persuaded there's any particular need to change any detailed aspects of that policy, and we are recommending it to you for adoption, apart from the Hackney Carriage knowledge test, which we're hoping, given the challenges for everybody at the moment, you'd consider bringing in early in 2021. I think the date that we've given there, the suggested date, is the 4th of January 2021. Now, in relation to COVID-19 and the difficulties that the licensing service have been facing during this difficult time, I think I probably need to go through that in a bit more detail than I have the other aspects of this report. And I'm starting, Chair, on page 45 of the report. Given the current arrangements, at the moment, we're unable to accept new driver licence applications. So people who want to be a first-time Hackney Carriage and private hire driver, unable to deal with those at the moment because we can't see them face-to-face at this current time. We can't do communication tests with them. They can't get in and do a medical, and the driving exam that they have to do with Links Road Safety Partnership. All of those things, unfortunately, they can't achieve. So that document at Appendix C of the report sets out for people that unfortunately we can't deal with new applicants at the moment, but we will tell them when we can in due course. What I wanted to focus particularly on this at the moment is your drivers that are coming in for driver renewals at the moment. They're unable to get their medicals done. Their doctors are just unable to see them. And so what we have been doing, and we're hoping that you'll endorse this procedure until such time as the current COVID-19 regulations are extinguished or finished, or whatever you want to call it. Drivers that are applying for 3-year renewals, what we're doing with them is getting them to make a medical declaration that their medical condition has not deteriorated. We're then issuing them, as long as all their other checks that we can do, we're issuing them a 1-year driver license on the understanding that in 2021, they will get the medical completed, and as long as the medical's fine, then the licensing team would issue them the other 2 years of that 3-year license. So that's, I'm just hoping members are okay to endorse that for this current arrangement where we're struggling to get drivers done for medicals. Drivers are also contacting us about installing protective screens in their vehicles, in their Hackney Carriage or private hire vehicles. So on page 46, there's hopefully a temporary arrangement there that members would be happy with, that would enable people to install screens for their protection if they wish to do so. But it makes it perfectly clear, that policy, that this is a temporary arrangement, and when the current arrangements finish, they would be expected to remove that screen from the vehicle within a set period of notice given by the authority. Now, on page 47 of the report, it mentions face coverings. Now, under the government's current arrangements, people on public transport, so that is trains and buses and trams, are expected to wear face coverings, face masks or face coverings. There is no legal requirement for that to happen in relation to Hackney Carriage and private hire vehicles. But what we're suggesting as officers in this policy document, just to tide us over the current situation, is that this authority recommends that all Hackney Carriage and private hire drivers wear face coverings or face masks. It wouldn't be a specific requirement. It would be a recommendation on this authority's part. But of course, you may wish to debate that in a moment, Chair. I think probably, Chair, that's all I need to say at the moment. I'm quite happy to answer questions from the councillors, from members. It really is about, I think today, do members wish to move forward with the consultation results? Do they wish to amend the proposed policy? Do they wish to amend the policy, leave the policy as it is with adoption? And any specific questions in relation to these temporary COVID-19 arrangements that the licensing team have put in place, which we're hoping the committee can endorse just to tie us over this difficult time. So I'll put myself on mute for the moment, Chair, but of course I'll come off mute again if there's any specific questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Adrian. Thank you. I have got, first of all, Councillor Billy Brooks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question really was about obviously the medicals, they can't get them done, so they're being extended for the year. But the question was, after the year's up, obviously because they're only getting 1 year, is it going to be free once they get the medical and they send it in? Is it going to be free, or are they going to have to pay again? Really, that was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, the intention was that the 2 years, there would be no charge for those additional 2 years. They'd be expected to fill an application form in and probably do a declaration again in relation to certain aspects. They probably would go through a DVLA check, which would be no charge for that. No, there'd be no charge at all in 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could you take your blue hand down, Billy, please? Councillor Neil Jones.
Good afternoon, Chairman and ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to just go through the bits that I wrote down really, rather than bounce about. I agree with the officers about the 3-year medical standard that we should accept. I agree that the knowledge test should be put off to the new year. And I think it's very good that you're doing a declaration of medical when they can't get to see a doctor. The other points I wanted to make was on page 27, it talks about convictions. We nearly always have to ask whether there's any pending ones regarding, speed cameras or anything like that. Could we include in there that they should notify us of any pending convictions as well as the existing convictions and spent convictions? That was one thing. On page 37, we talk about phones, and this is a self-guarding thing where they mustn't phone their passengers. Should we include there that they shouldn't be using the phone at all with in the vehicle or when they're moving? Obviously, they can when they're stationary. But do you think that really they don't ought to be phoning anybody when they're actually working in the vehicle? And on page 46, I've read about your thing. Why can't they put a permanent shield? Is this derogatory to the vehicle at the end of the day? Surely if they want to put a shield up because it's safer for them with COVID, it's also probably safer for them if they get some drunk or somebody in the back who tries to reach them. So I wonder why we are insistent on that the shield has to be only temporary. Why can't they put one that is suitable for the vehicle that remains in the vehicle? And last but not least, page 47, I think we should recommend that masks must be worn by drivers, not recommended. And I would put that we recommend passengers wear them in the vehicle, but I would say I think that the mask should and must be statutory for drivers. Sorry to be a mouthful, but that's it.
Thank you for that. Would you like to comment, Adrian?
Yeah, I can come back on those, Chair. I'm more than happy to do so. So in relation to pending convictions, yeah, the application, the driver application form, which people have to fill in, does ask about pending convictions. So yeah, more than happy if members wish to amend that particular part of the policy document to include a requirement for pending conditions, sorry, pending convictions that they know about, because there may be some that they don't know about. So, but quite happy to pop that in there, and we can come up with some suitable wording if members are happy and are minded for that to take place. In relation to phones, I perhaps need to ask Councillor Neil Jones just to clarify a bit more for me, because of course they can't use their phone. Well, they can't use a phone in their hand while they're driving,
Yeah.
but they will use a phone hands-free, and that's how most of them communicate with their operating base. That's how they will get often their next business from their controller or wherever. So by stipulating they couldn't communicate in any way by phone, that would restrict them. I'm not really sure that that would be fair or appropriate or reasonable, just in my view. But quite happy if members want to debate that, Chair. I can come back on that one. In relation to the screens, I think it would be fair to say as officers, we're not really wanting to see screens in the vehicles forever. We understand why people want to put those screens in for the protection that they perceive it's going to give them in relation to COVID-19. Most councils that I've spoken to are expecting the screens to be removed after the current emergency arrangements, or whatever you want to call them, have been ceased by the government. It's just more or less fallen in line with what most people, most authorities that I'm aware of have done. But of course, yeah, some people may wish to keep those screens forever, or as long as for the age of the vehicle. It's not something I would like to see, but of course, if members want that to happen, by all means, that's a debate that they can have as well. Right, in relation to face coverings, I think it would be fair to say that the officers that where we've discussed it, we feel that the authorities should recommend the wearing of face coverings by drivers. One of the reasons we didn't ask the authority to consider it to be a mandatory requirement, because remember, you can't attach conditions to Hackney Carriage private hire driver licenses, but you can give an expectation that they do certain things. Now, if you said it was a mandatory requirement for drivers in East Lindsey to wear face coverings, then you would put the onus on the officers, I'm assuming, to issue penalty points to drivers under the council's penalty point scheme if they were observed not wearing a face covering. I'll be honest, as officers, with all the other challenges that we've got at the moment, we are going to find it difficult if members wishes to police whether drivers are wearing face coverings or not and issuing penalty points for that. Quite happy if that's what the members want, but I just need to make you aware that we would struggle, I think, with current resources and the current challenges to keep on top of that.
Yeah.
Has that answered all the questions, Councillor Jones? Have I missed anything?
No, that is great, thank you. And I must agree with you regarding the phone issue. I read it as it says in there about them ringing the passenger in the car. I was not thinking about their hands-free communicating with their control or getting the jobs. But I just didn't think they should be ringing other people or the passengers in the back. So I can see your point of view there. With regard to the permanent masks, then yeah, I have to agree with you. If it's going to be very difficult for you to police under the circumstances as it is, then probably it's better to put a recommendation than mandatory. I do think page 46, the permanent shields, I think we should be flexible, because if people are spending money on the vehicles to have shields installed, and it's got to be suitable to the vehicle manufacturer according to our policy, then I do feel that we should be able to let them leave them in if they want to, because they've gone to that expense of having them fitted, and it would protect them. We're not saying they've got to be there, but at least if they put them in, then I think we should be flexible enough to allow them to retain them if we want. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jones. If you'd like to delete your hand, please. And Councillor David Mannion.
Hi, thanks. I didn't quite understand the time period for medicals. I mean, to me, it seems as though moving in line with the DVLA requirements for vocational driving, which would be every 3 years, would be a sensible move. I have great doubts about whether self-employed people, and I might be wrong here, how they would report illnesses that would affect their driving capabilities. The second issue, I think, is in relation to the COVID regulations. My personal view is that COVID will not go away. I think there is a duty not only to protect drivers, but also to protect passengers from driving. Being in a Hackney carriages means that you are within the socially, you are well within the 2 meters, possibly the 1 meter that would be recommended, and for more than 15 minutes. And face covering would, in most cases, be highly desirable, if not required. I would put it that face covering should be, for want of a better word, strongly encouraged, and I would suggest that the drivers offer passengers a face covering when they enter the cab, if nothing else, for the protection of the passenger. And as far as for the shields, I think it's a movable feast, but I think they will be required for a long time to come. As far as mobile phones, the biggest danger with mobile phones isn't so much the use of the hands, it's the actual talking and the lack of concentration while talking. And there probably needs to be a better system of communication between control and drivers, with respect to the necessary communication that is necessary for Hackney drivers. One of the issues, I don't know, and there may be more information since I'm new to this, would be whether there has been a survey of how truly hands-free the equipment in the Hackney carriages is. Is it truly the fact they can actually voice dial, for example? Do we have data on that? So that's what I would say. I'm finished.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor. Would you like to reply, Adrian, or?
I think possibly some of that I'm not sure it's appropriate for me to reply to, but what I would say to in relation to the medicals, this authority has done 6 yearly medicals, I think since 2005, or may have been earlier than that, but I started here in 2004. So as far as I'm aware, we've been doing 6-year medicals at least since 2004. The DVLA requirement is for 5, and this authority has decided to go for 6 to tie in with 3 years. If the committee wanted to go to 3 yearly medicals rather than 6 yearly, that would be a bit of a shock to the trade. It's not something that they would have factored into their costs, let's say, but that's for members to debate if members think it's appropriate for 3 years rather than 6 years or 5 years. Yeah, if members are happy for the screens to remain, that's a member decision. And in relation to, I'm sorry, I've missed the last point. There was a last point there, Councillor Mannion, wasn't there?
So the last point was, well, there are 2 last points. One was how truly hands-free is, and whether we have any data to say that these are, for example, voice-activated phones rather than having to punch in a number while driving. I can be hands-free with my phone on my seat, and I punch in a number to activate the phone, or I can voice call. And the second issue, which I think is more important, is the issue of face coverings. So within a cab, you are within a very close proximity. You don't know who you've got. I don't know what the driver has got. I would be very nervous getting into a cab at this point in time. I think it would be important. I think it would be highly desirable, for putting it mildly, for drivers to have face coverings, and for drivers to offer face coverings to their passengers.
Okay. In relation to how people have got their individual phones set up in their Hackney Carriage or private hire vehicle, we don't have any data on that. That's not something that we've looked at. I mean, yet again, if members want us to send a questionnaire out to people and ask them how they are actually dealing with phones in their vehicles, we're quite happy to do that. It would be a relatively straightforward thing to set up on the database and send a questionnaire out. In relation to the face coverings or the masks, all I would say is that the current regulations do not cover Hackney carriages or private hire vehicles. So if the committee wanted to do something in relation to face coverings, to make it mandatory or strongly recommended, that would be over and above what the current law requires in relation to face coverings and transport. Currently, the regulations don't cover taxis and private hire vehicles. They're outside that remit. So you would be looking at going over and above what's required in the country, in England as a whole. So yet again, that's a debate for yourselves to have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian. Councillor Billy Brooks.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, what it really is I think it's important to note that these taxi drivers and private hire people, they've worked throughout this whole pandemic, and you know, they haven't complained, and I think they need to be commended for actually getting, because they've been getting nurses to work and things like that. So I do think it's important to mention that. Another, I've got a few points, but the first one is the knowledge test. I think it's set for the 4th of January. I would feel more comfortable if we went a year from this date, because obviously we don't know if this is going to go on till, we don't know when it's going to end. So I think it's important that we give them, you know, a year from now. I'd feel more comfortable with that, because obviously it gives them more time, and they've worked for a really stressful period. So I think that's important. Another thing is about the screens. I think, you know, if they've installed them in the vehicle, it's probably a considerable cost. So I think it's important that they can keep them up if they so wish, but obviously, you know, it's recommended that they're taken down whenever. The hands-free, I think, as long as they're not breaking the law and they've got the system in place where they can communicate and it's legal and it's, you know, I can't see the problem with that. And finally, the masks, I think it should be, you know, very much up to the driver themselves. Obviously, we recommend that they wear them, but at the end of the day, we haven't got to sit in a taxi cab driving passengers around for, I don't know, however many hours it be all day. So you can't put yourself in their shoes. So I think it is important that we recommend it, but to make it mandatory, I think would be a bit harsh. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Claire Newman. Could you take your hand off, Billy, please?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment in regard to the screens and the face masks. I would just like to say that I agree that if we're going to get the people to put screens up at their cost, it should be at their discretion as and when they feel comfortable to take those screens down. Rightfully so, we don't know how that person feels within their vehicle. So I think that is, if it is fit for purpose, then they should be entitled to speak that up. Again, I would just like to talk about the face masks. yes, I agree we can say it's a recommendation, but I disagree with making it mandatory. I think that there's lots of consideration that's been spoken about in regard to people with certain health conditions. I certainly know of people with, you know, breathing difficulties say that it would be uncomfortable for them to be in that position. We need to think about the financial implication of who's providing those masks. And if we're asking people to provide them, it's about the use, you know, the quality of those masks. One person's mask might be very efficient for a 15-minute journey, but may not be the same efficiency for a 55-minute journey. So I think to agree that it's a recommendation is fine. To make it mandatory, I would disagree on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Neil Jones, could you take your hand down, please, Claire?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to propose that we accept this policy. I would like to propose that we accept this policy that has been put forward by the officers with the small amendments. One is that we add something to the pending of convictions. Number two is that we give the operators a flexibility to retain their shields or remove them as they feel fit. I think that we should keep the 6-year medical that we have at the moment. And I also think that we should add a strong recommendation that taxi drivers must wear a mask or face covering when people are in the vehicle. That's my proposal.
Thank you. I would second those, actually, because I think it's been a very difficult time, and at the moment I've noticed taxis, when it's been at the highest of the epidemic, that they're not wearing masks or anything else, and neither are the passengers. So I think we're a little bit late in trying to enforce something that would be difficult to enforce by our officers anyway. We could recommend, that would be fine. I could recommend that the drivers, for their own safety, wear a face mask, but I think it should be entirely up to their choice and not mandatory. But has anyone else got any other questions they would like to ask Adrian, or any comments they would like to make, please?
Yes, sorry.
Councillor, yes, Councillor Jones.
Sorry, can you hear me? I don't know if I'm on mute or not.
Yes, fine.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I agree with Councillor Brooks that the knowledge test should be deferred for 1 year in their recommendations as well.
Well, we did say 2021, so any time in that year would be suffice. As soon as it's practical, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree.
What's your thoughts, Adrian?
I think what I would say, Chair, obviously this is a member decision for members. As officers, what we just need today is some clarity from you. So if you're going to say as a group that you want the knowledge test for Hackney Carriage drivers to be delayed, just probably need to give us a date as to when that's delayed to. So if you're saying a year from today, then of course that's going to be the 22nd of June 2021. I think probably we just need to check whether that's a Saturday or a Sunday, though. I think if somebody just wants to check that. That's for members, whether you want to go with the 4th of January 2021 date or date in June 2021.
It's a Tuesday, Mr. Twitty.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, if you want to move forward with the policy, remember as well that you need to say a date that it's coming into effect. So if you're saying that the policy is going to come into effect now with the changes that you've made and the driver knowledge test to come in a date in June 2021, you just need to confirm that the revised policy that's being discussed comes into date with immediate effect, or whatever date you want it to come into effect on. And then when the other part of it, the knowledge test, comes into effect as well. So always remember, you need to give me a date as to when you want your amendments or your changes to policy to come into effect. So that's all I've got to say at the moment, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian. I propose that the policy comes into effect with immediate effect, because then and then the knowledge test comes into effect as from the date that's been suggested. Do we have
I'll
a second
second that, Chairman. I'll second that.
Thank you. Are there any objections to that? Save going through the list. So I take it everyone's in favour unless they show. Okay, so thank you. So that will be carried, but that will take effect from today, Adrian. And we can move forward with that policy. And your knowledge one will come into effect on the 22nd of June, if that's all right with you.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Chair. And I'll enact all that on your behalf. And then I'll probably drop you an email, Chair, when all that's done.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's great. So now we move on to item 5, which is the date of the next meeting, which is programmed for the 7th of September. Hopefully we might be able to meet in person, but we'll hopefully keep our fingers crossed. So we'll move on now to item 6, which is the review of the Hackney Carriage vehicle licence. And part of it is confidential, so I'll wait for Adrian to do his report first, and then we'll move into the private part when you've finished, Adrian, if you'd like to give your report.
Thank you, Chair. So what I'm going to do, as long as members are happy with that, is I'm going to explain the process that's being considered today in open session, and then when you need to discuss the individual medical circumstances of the person that's made the application, then as long as members are happy, you'll go into private session. So first of all, I'll just explain the process in public forum, and then you'll consider whether you wish to go into private session or not. So this one is in relation to application for review. Sorry, not application for review. It's application for an exemption from the legal requirements to carry a person in a wheelchair accessible Hackney carriage or private hire vehicle. So under the Equality Act, all licensed drivers are legally required to give all reasonable assistance to any disabled person wishing to travel or enter their licensed vehicle. And if it's a wheelchair accessible vehicle, they've got to give all the help that's needed to get that person in their wheelchair into the vehicle, get them secure in the vehicle, and then get them out again at the end of the journey. Now, of course, as a driver, if you've got a medical condition which would make that difficult, then you are allowed to apply for an exemption from that legal requirement. Now, this authority has a policy in relation to that. And in effect, what that policy says is you can obviously apply for the exemption, but the exemption application will be considered by the licensing committee rather than being considered by officers acting under delegated powers. The policy also says that you must produce medical evidence from your doctor indicating that you have a condition which would make it difficult for you to help a person whilst they're seated in their wheelchair. And the policy also goes on to say that it recognises that there's 2 types of exemption under the legislation. There's a temporary exemption and a lifetime exemption. But this authority's policy says lifetime exemptions will only be granted in exceptional circumstances, and the norm will be for this authority to grant temporary exemptions which need renewing every now and again, which of course then gives the authority an opportunity to recheck that person's medical condition. So, Chair, that's all I've got to say in the public forum, the public part of the committee. It's whether for you and the members, if you wish to now move to confidential session.
Yes, well, I propose that we move into the exclusion of the public and press at this time. with no objections to that. So that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items on the grounds that if they were present, there could be disclosed exempt information as defined at paragraph 1, 2 and 7 of part 1 of the schedule 12A of the Act as amended. So if we could move into the private session, please.
We could have a proposer and seconder, please, Chairman.
I'll
Yes, could I have a
second that.
seconder?
Yeah, I'll second
Thank you.
that.
Thank
Right,
you.
I'm just going to